Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Mariana. I'm the dietitian over at HealthRIGHT 360. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us for this brownie making class to fundraise funds for our food pharmacy. We will get started in just a few minutes, but first I wanted to go over some logistics with you and share a few words about our food pharmacy. If you have any questions during the class or need any extra support, please go ahead and send us any of your questions through the chat function at the bottom and we will answer them. Before we get started, there's a couple of reminders on your screen. So make sure that you preheat your oven to 325. If you're using pecans, lightly toast them in the oven at 350 for 7 to 10 minutes. Butter and flour a 9x13 baking pan, and make a double boiler by placing a steel working bowl over a simmering pot of water. We will give you a few minutes to do these steps if you haven't yet, while I share some information about our food pharmacy, which you are generously supporting today. Our food pharmacy helps address the highly prevalent food insecurity problem in our city. We currently serve about 40 households every week by providing them with a healthy grocery bag, which is worth about $40 to $50. And this includes fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and a lean protein. Our patients also receive a recipe, including items in the grocery bag for the week. We currently have raised over $11,000. Our goal has been $20,000. So we're a little bit over halfway there. And I really cannot thank you enough for supporting us and our food pharmacy. Also, I wanted to share with you that we would love to see your creation. So please take some pictures throughout the class and share them with us, okay? Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you guys Chuck Sigel. He's the founder and owner of Charles Chocolates. Charles Chocolates are handmade in small batches using only the finest all-natural ingredients. Chuck is self-taught and he has won a Good Food Award in 2011, nabbed a Sunset Magazine's Best of the West Award, as well as a quote from 7x7 and the East Bay Express. Thank you so much, Chuck, for joining us today and for donating your time to support our food pharmacy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Very cool to see all of you here. The one thing, by the way, I want to start with a couple quick things, making sure your oven's preheated. The one thing that was left off of the slide that was on the instruction sheet and recipe you should have gotten is that pot of simmering water should have the chocolate and butter in it. If not melted already, put in there now so that it can melt and we can use it. The brownie recipe that we're using tonight and the one that you all got is really a base recipe. I make them with pecans mostly because I kind of love chocolate and pecan together, but you can do anything with these. You could put in chocolate chips, you could put in any other nut, you could put in dried fruit, peanut butter, almond butter, whatever you want to flavor them works really, really well. This is just, this is like having that plain chocolate chip cookie recipe that then you over the course of years kind of futz with and add to and take away. It's that kind of recipe. As Mariana said, there's a chat function. Put in any questions as we go. I usually kind of like to answer questions along the way. It's gonna be a little bit more difficult tonight. So I think we're just doing the questions at the end. But by all means, anything that you wanna ask, go ahead. I'll try to answer. So with that, we're gonna assume that all the stuff that you were meant to do in advance has been done. If not, I'll go slow. Most of the time is actually gonna be spent at the end answering questions and talking back and forth because this part of it actually, getting them in the oven doesn't take a huge amount of time. So I've got everything prepared and ready to go. Whenever you're cooking, especially when you're baking, baking is much more scientific and dependent on precise measurements than most cooking. So it's really great to have everything already measured out, ready to go, so that when we start putting a recipe together, you're not scrambling to find something. Everyone in my family can tell you that I've spent lots of time scrambling in the middle of the recipe trying to find something in the kitchen, and I always know where it is and I can never find it, and it makes life really miserable. So with that, we're going to do one other prep step before we start mixing things together. Presumably, if you're using pecans, you've got your toasted pecans in a bowl. What I always like to do, and this is, by the way, with anything that you use as an inclusion in a cake, in brownies, you've probably noticed that batters tend to get very liquidy as they bake. And whatever you put in is usually heavy enough that it sinks to the bottom. And you end up with all the nuts kind of at the bottom of the brownie. So what I like to do is basically coat them with a little bit of flour. And the flour basically creates friction with the brownie batter. And it actually helps keep them suspended. And I wanted to do that before we started because I'm going to add the rest of the flour into the batter. And once I do that, it's too late. I could go get some more flour and do it, but it's just always easiest, especially since we're trying to keep measurements precise, that we do that in advance. So with that, we start basically by mixing some of the wet ingredients with sugar. So we start with sugar, 4 eggs, and they're just lightly beaten. You don't have to beat them really hard. A lot of recipes say add eggs one at a time and make sure they're fully incorporated. You don't have to do that with this recipe because we're just basically mixing it in with the sugar. You can use a whisk, you can use a spatula, whatever you'd like. And we basically just want to get that nice and mixed together. And then we're going to mix in a teaspoon of vanilla. And you'll notice as I pull out a gallon jug of vanilla, I'm not super precise when I measure that. Mostly because I love the flavor of vanilla with chocolate. And this is another time when you can actually start freestyling a little bit. Instead of vanilla, you could use a liqueur. You can use amaretto for a really nice almond flavor, or frangelico for hazelnut. You can use any type of extract. Besides vanilla, which is an extract, you can use a nut extract, like an almond extract. You can use orange essence, anything you want. And it really adds a lot of really great flavors to your brownies. But I'm just going to add a little bit of vanilla. You'll notice this is a little thicker. This is actually vanilla paste, which is vanilla extract that has the seeds in it. And that's because in our kitchen here at Charles Chocolates, if we don't use a whole vanilla bean, we always use the paste. Just more flavor. Just get that nice and mixed up. And basically it should, again, it should look like this. It's just a pale yellow sugar mixture. You can do this, by the way. I tend to make these by hand, mostly because it's easier cleanup than getting all the parts of a mixer dirty. But you can do this in a stand mixer as well. This recipe is sized so it fits well in a 5-quart Hobart bowl, and certainly the 6-quart as well. Okay, next we want to add the chocolate and butter. These have been on the double boiler. And one of the things that you'll want to do before is dry the bottom of the bowl a little bit so you don't get that condensation dripping into your mix. Same thing, just add it in. And again, you just want to mix this thoroughly. Make sure that the chocolate and the sugar mixture are really well incorporated with each other. With any brownie, you also want to avoid, as I'm telling you to thoroughly mix it in, over mixing. One of the things that happens when you over mix brownie batter is you end up with kind of like that crust on the top, which actually kind of looks kind of cool, but it's kind of just a hard crust on the top of the brownie that just doesn't, when you're eating it, it's just not always the best brownie experience. Okay, so once that's really well incorporated, it's time to add the dry ingredients. And again, the dry ingredient caution is, again, you want to mix it really thoroughly, but you don't want to over mix it. You don't want to like beat it so much that, again, you're going to end up with a crust when you bake it. So I pre-sifted flour and sugar together. The reason you want to sift flour, by the way, is flour can get really clumpy in a batter. And sometimes you'll find you're mixing, and then you pour it into the pan and you see like little clumps of flour showing up. If you sift it first, it doesn't completely eliminate that problem, but it helps an awful lot. And then when I'm mixing this, and I tend to use a folding motion, it just helps incorporate the flour a little bit better. And again, you're using as few motions as possible to get everything incorporated when you fold. Again, as opposed to a mixer. If you do this in a mixer, by the way, make sure you use the paddle attachment. Don't use the whisk. Now, when it's almost incorporated, it's not entirely incorporated yet, but when it's almost incorporated, then you want to add the pecans if you're using pecans, or chocolate chips, or whatever you're using as the inclusion. Just sprinkle them on the top. There's extra flour. Make sure you knock all the flour in, because again, the recipe is kind of dependent on that weight being accurate. And once it's incorporated, we are actually done. Like I said, this is the quickest, easiest part. We wanted to do all the pre-work before we got on the Zoom call, so that we weren't sitting and waiting 15 or 20 minutes for all of the chocolate to melt, which sometimes it will take in a double boiler. I will tell you, by the way, you don't have to use a double boiler. There are other ways of melting chocolate. You can even use the microwave. The issue you have to be careful of is chocolate burns very, very, very easily. So if you're using the microwave, you want to put the butter and chocolate in a microwave safe bowl, a glass bowl probably, and microwave it for 15 seconds at a time at half power, and stop and let it sit for about 10 seconds, stir it with a spatula, and keep doing it that way. That way you'll melt everything, and then the heated butter will actually do a lot of the melting of the chocolate, and you'll avoid burning it, because burnt chocolate, I'm sure you've all tasted it, has a very distinct taste. And even just a little will basically make the entire batch of brownies taste like burnt chocolate brownies, which, and you hear about burnt caramel, things like that, burnt chocolate brownies is not a good thing. So once everything's mixed together, you just want to basically pour the mix into the pan. I just kind of jiggle a little bit to get everything flat and even. Some people like to use a spatula. I don't like to use a spatula because, quite frankly, the batter gets all over the spatula. And then you're like scraping and then scraping the spatula and having to clean up the pan. Just basically jiggle it back and forth, knock it a couple times to get the air bubbles out, and you're ready to go. So once that's done, all you do is you stick it in the oven. And I don't know about you, my favorite part of cooking shows is when 5 seconds later they're done. Slightly different brownie pan, I just realized, but this is a batch I made a couple hours ago. Same recipe, same pecan, same everything. But I didn't think we wanted to sit around for half an hour or more waiting for brownies to cook. So hopefully once you get yours in the oven, first make sure you time them. All ovens are different. So we do these at 325 degrees because we actually don't want them to get burnt on the edges before the inside is cooked. So a higher temperature like 350 or 375 will probably do that with these brownies. So we just bake them a little lower. They are going to be very fudgy and very moist. So you want to use the test using the tip of a knife or a toothpick stuck in the middle, and it will come out without crumbs on it, but it will still be wet. And don't worry about that, because a lot of times, like with cake recipes, they say it should be clean and dry. This will be clean, but it won't be dry, because these are very fudgy brownies, which when they're hot means the fat is still basically loose in it, and that's what's going to come up on the knife point. You can see the knife marks where I was doing that a little while ago to make sure these were done. So like I said, we'll spend most of our time answering any questions about anything that you bake within reason. Any other questions you have. This isn't actually what we do for a living. We're chocolatiers, candy makers. So if you have questions about chocolate, I can answer those as well. And actually, while we're talking about chocolate, and I believe it might have been in the recipe or it might have been mentioned, like anything you make, the quality of the ingredients will basically determine how good these are, and the quality of the chocolate will absolutely determine how these taste. There are a couple chocolates that I like to recommend because you can get them almost anywhere. There's a chocolate company from Switzerland that most of you, if not all of you, know the name. It's called Lindt, L-I-N-D-T. And they have a 70% bittersweet bar. It's called Lindt Excellence that you can get in almost every grocery store in the country. I have tons of chocolate at home for when I'm doing recipes or cooking, but there have been times when I've not had bittersweet chocolate, and 9 times out of 10, I'll just run up to Safeway and buy a Lindt bar or Lindt bars to use. Fantastic chocolate. It melts really, really well and has great flavor. We here at Charles Chocolates, for all of our pastry, we use chocolate from Guittard, which is a local Bay Area company. If you can buy the Guittard actual chocolate, it comes in discs. That's also a phenomenal chocolate to use. I don't recommend using melted chocolate chips, even the Guittard ones, because the formulation of chocolate chips with the added fats and everything else are completely different than regular bittersweet chocolate. So they're good as like mix-ins, but not as the chocolate to use when you're baking. And then finally, there's a phenomenal French chocolate called Valrhona. And we use a lot of Valrhona here in our candy making. But Valrhona, interestingly enough, the largest retailer in the world is Trader Joe's. And they have 2 or 3 different Valrhona bittersweet chocolate bars, usually at the checkout at Trader Joe's. And you'll get a better price than you'll find anywhere on a really phenomenal chocolate. So that's another one that's great when you're doing this. With that, I don't know if there are any questions lined up.
We do have a question, which is how long should someone who's using an 8x8 pan bake these brownies for?
Oh, a science question, great. Worst thing you can do to someone who's just like a cook in a kitchen is ask them a science question. So there's actually a way to figure that out. And I don't exactly know what the mathematical equation is, but if you Google that, because I've actually done stuff like that, where I wanted to take a recipe like the brownie recipe and do it as a cake. So I've like had 9-inch springform pans and I've had to figure out how long to bake it. I've actually gone and I've Googled it. So I apologize, first question out of the gate, I can't answer.
I have a question, Chuck.
Yes.
Okay, or should I put it in chat? Is it better to put it in chat?
Well, I mean, you've already unmuted. I'm fine answering if everyone at HealthRIGHT's cool with that.
So talk to us about chocolate chips in like chocolate chip cookies or other things that you do chocolate chips. I've read recently that like for cookies, it's good to use semi-sweet and bittersweet chocolate chips to kind of hit different parts of the tongue. But I'd love to just know like what your tricks of the trade that you're willing to share regarding just chocolate chips and use of them in baked goods.
So you mentioned bittersweet and chocolate and semi-sweet together, which is actually a really great suggestion. I do something actually a little different. I use bittersweet and milk chocolate chips together a lot. And I do that when I bake chocolate chip cookies because I love the bittersweet chocolate flavor, but there's something really wonderful about kind of that dairy in the chocolate that you get from milk chocolate. So I'll usually do 50-50 bittersweet milk chocolate. It's entirely up to taste. There's really no kind of rule. But it goes back to what I was saying before. Don't buy cheapo chocolate chips either. Don't like go to 7-Eleven and buy 7-Eleven brand semi-sweet chocolate chips, because you really will get what you pay for. No offense, 7-Eleven. So if you can find, again, Guittard chocolate chips are really high quality. They're available everywhere. And they have milk, semi-sweet, bittersweet. They also have really wonderful large chips. Like if you want a cookie where you can like where you break the cookie and the chip is still kind of molten and pulls away. Those are phenomenal in cookies. They even have flavored chips like butterscotch chips if you want something like that. Again, going back to you can do anything with these brownies. You can use a butterscotch chip and get a really nice flavor if that's what you like.
One other question, if you don't mind. Guittard makes a chocolate chip that is in a pink bag. You may or may not know it. And they have a name for it. It begins with the letter K. I can't remember. I can go check it out. Do you know what it is? I don't know if it's just like marketing.
I have no clue, because when we buy chocolate chips, they come in 50-pound bags. So it's been a long time since I've gone to the grocery store to buy them. So unfortunately, I don't know what the retail packing looks like. If you have them in your kitchen, and go grab them.
I will.
Okay, tell me what they say, and I can tell you what they are.
All right, thanks, Chuck.
Chuck, we have a few more questions. First, can you repeat the specific chocolate brands that you were recommending earlier?
Sure. So the most widely available is Lindt, L-I-N-D-T. It's a Swiss chocolate brand. And again, specifically when I'm doing baking, it's called Lindt Excellence. It's in a white wrapper with black highlights. It's a 70% bittersweet chocolate that's just really fantastic. Guittard, G-U-I-T-T-A-R-D. They're in a lot of their chips. Most grocery stores have their chocolate chips, especially in major cities. Some stores will also have their actual chocolate. Usually comes in a box. It's about 5 by 7, 2 inches deep, and they'll have a couple bittersweets and milk. The ones I use are the 61 and the 72% bittersweet chocolates, and they have 41% milk. Like when I'm using a combination of dark and milk chips, I'll use their 41% milk. Oh, and Valrhona, sorry. Valrhona, which are, again, really phenomenal French chocolate, great eating chocolate, but also good for baking and candy making. And the easiest way to find that is Trader Joe's. Perfect. By the way, all of them are available online. Amazon can probably get you any of them in 2 days. Not that I'm suggesting you use Amazon, but pretty much everything is available now everywhere online. But if you're just going to your local store, those are the easiest ones to find.
Perfect. And then why did we add flour with the pecans?
So we add flour to the pecans, and you would even want to lightly dust with flour chocolate chips. And we do that to keep them from sinking in the batter. When you take the batter, you all saw that the batter was kind of thick. But when you put it in the oven and start baking, it becomes almost liquidy before it sets up because of all the butter and the cocoa butter and the chocolate. They liquefy under heat. So what the flour does is create friction between the pecan and the batter and help keep them from sinking to the bottom, which they'll do pretty quickly because pecans are very smooth if you don't flour them first.
Great. And then Timothy would like to know, what about storing? Is the freezer okay? Or is it better to put them in the refrigerator or counter?
Counter and eat them quickly. So if you're going to store them for more than a couple days, the freezer's better. Wrap them first tightly in saran wrap and then in foil. I highly discourage the refrigerator for storing anything chocolate, because chocolate and baked goods take on flavors really easily, and moisture. And your refrigerator basically is going to whatever is in your refrigerator, your brownies will taste like that the next day. And that's just not really a good thing. True of chocolate, by the way. Never store chocolate in the refrigerator. Always better just at a cool room temperature and just eat it fast if you're worried about it.
Next question. Do you use a glass or a metal pan, and what is the difference, if any?
So we use all metal in our kitchen at Charles Chocolates for food safety reasons. The one thing that we don't want is for a something glass to break and have to worry about glass getting into anything we're cooking. So we have actually banned anything breakable. There's no glass, ceramic, anything in our kitchen here. Just because that's the way my brain has been trained to work. I'm the same at home. I mean, I have some Pyrex dishes that I'll use for lasagna sometimes or something like that. But when I'm baking or cooking, I only use metal.
And could you repeat for everyone how long the brownies are supposed to cook for?
So it depends on your oven, but I always say start checking at 30 minutes and check them about every 5 minutes after that if they're not ready. It shouldn't take more than 45 minutes.
Perfect. And then Lori would like to say that the guitar chips she referenced are a Coma Extra Semi-Sweet.
Okay, so that's a marketing name. So for all of their chocolates, now it does mean it's one of their higher end chips because they're basically run-of-the-mill chips they don't name. But for example, when we buy guitar chocolate that we use industrially here, they all have names. And I'm sure there's a meaning to them somewhere in kind of the heads of the marketing people at Guitar. I just don't know what they are. Come on, I know there has to be more questions.
Hey, Chuck, can you tell us again how to tell when they're done? It was the knife test, but there was a modification.
Well, yeah, so the knife test or a toothpick test, it'll still be wet but clean. So you won't get crumbs, but you won't have a dry knife tip either.
One more question. Why do we butter and flour the pan?
Really just to keep the brownies from sticking. If you just butter the pan and then the butter, you let the brownies completely cool to like dead cold, that butter is going to harden. And its purpose of basically creating a smooth release is going to disappear partially. If you flour it as well, that flour, as it bakes next to the butter, creates a barrier and it helps them come out easier.
Two more questions.
Oh, wait, by the way, if you're using a nonstick pan, you don't have to use flour. You can just butter them because nonstick pans are 90% of the job, and a little butter or Pam or some other like Vaseline, some type of spray release on a nonstick pan is great. And then you don't need to flour them.
What about mixing the hot chocolate with the eggs? Should we be concerned about cooking the eggs too fast?
Great question. If we were adding the hot chocolate and butter mix, and it should only be warm, by the way, that's why we use a double boiler. It shouldn't be above 120 degrees, but there is still a risk if you were adding it directly to egg, all of it at once, given kind of the mismatch in quantity, it is a risk. But since we already mixed the egg in with the sugar and vanilla, the egg has been dispersed over such a large mass that it actually isn't a risk. Combined with the relatively low temperature of the melted chocolate, it's not going to happen.
Great. And does the melted chocolate have to come to room temperature first?
No. A lot of people say that it incorporates better. I actually have never found that to be true. So, and I'm also not a super patient person in the kitchen. So I usually end up adding it while it's still pretty warm. And we apologize. I'm going to walk around in a circle because all of our lights in our kitchen are motion sensitive. I don't know if you've noticed, but it gets darker and darker as all the lights around me, because this is about a 20,000 square foot kitchen. I'm just in one corner of it, and all the lights are turning off. So I'll be back in a second.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It
Okay.
wasn't something I kind of anticipated.
No problem. We have two questions from Tony. What's your favorite candy to make, and how did you get into chocolate making?
My favorite candy to make is anything with cooked sugar. So caramels, toffees, pralines. there's something I just find really magic about the process of taking sugar and converting it into kind of the liquid that is the base of caramel. So we actually have a ton of different caramel products, really just because I like making it. So that's probably far and away my favorite. I taught myself candy making when I was in college, and ended up having a little business selling chocolates when I was in school in Rochester, New York, a long time ago.
Tiffany would like to know, what impact does room temperature have on eggs versus straight from the fridge?
It helps them incorporate more easily. When an egg is cold, it's really difficult sometimes to get it to smoothly incorporate into other things. And sometimes, like with sugar, like what we were just doing, it'll seize up and it'll take a lot of effort to really get it to incorporate well. Having it room temperature, even tempered, is really great. Oftentimes when it says room temperature, what I'll do is I'll take the eggs out of the fridge, I'll put them in a bowl of really hot tap water, as hot as our kitchen tap will go, and I'll let them sit for about 10 minutes before using them. So they'll actually be a little warmer than room temperature. But what's really nice about that is they'll incorporate really well into whatever I'm making.
Perfect. Do you ever bake dairy-free or gluten-free? If so, what dairy substitute do you use, and what gluten-free flour do you like?
So I don't do dairy-free. I've started doing more gluten-free, especially we have some friends who are gluten-free. Really because of them, a couple of years ago, I started experimenting with different gluten-free flours. The two I like best are Cup for Cup. And then I actually like using sometimes just rice flour. Most of the flour substitutes are mixtures of rice flour and other stuff. And depending on what you're making, like if I'm making cookies, just rice flour is a phenomenal substitute. It would be a different texture. It's not designed to mimic wheat flour, but it works really, really well. But Cup for Cup, I have found in almost all of the recipes I've tried it in, has worked really well. And I made scones, I've made pastries, and by and large, it works beautifully. There may be others out there that work really well, but we've only tried two, and that's the one I've preferred, and it just works really well.
What about vanilla? What type of vanilla do you like to cook with?
That's actually a great question, because vanilla, for those of you who don't know, a lot of it out there actually is really garbage and tastes more like alcohol than vanilla. There's a company called Nielsen Massey. Here's their logo. I'm not pitching them, but I will tell you it is the only vanilla I've used for the last 20 years. It's absolutely fantastic. Their vanilla paste, and we actually buy our Tahitian vanilla beans that we use when we're making our confections from them as well.
And you said that you prefer metal pans. Are there specific brands you prefer?
Not specific brands, but specific weights. When you're using a pan to bake in, you want to make sure it's fairly heavy duty. This is a brand, I think it's called maybe Big Daddy or something like that. It's something Daddy. And we use a lot of these in our kitchen. And they're really, really great. There's actually a new company out of Austin, Texas. I think it's called Made By. You've probably seen their pop-up ads. They're everywhere. And we've actually experimented with some of their sheet pans because they're really nice and heavy gauge and they're fantastic. But the key is just make sure it's heavyweight. If something's flimsy, if you can take a brownie pan like this and torque it in any way by twisting it, it's not going to be a great pan. And the risk you run is, besides wasting money on a pan that's going to wear out fast, is you're more likely to burn than you are with a heavy duty pan. If you do find yourself with thin pans, one way you can prevent the burning is if you're baking something like in a brownie pan, take the brownie pan, put it on a half sheet pan and put it in the oven like that. And the extra thickness will help keep stuff from burning.
Any recommendations to healthify a brownie, such as sugar substitutes, reducing flour, anything like that?
I am the absolute worst person to ask that question. I actually don't believe in that. If you want to create a recipe that's healthy, there are ways to do that. I have found that trying to take a classic, like pastry recipe especially, and make it healthy tends to end up with a real kind of substandard result. And for lack of a better way of putting it, I love basically full fat. I love the ingredients we use and the effect it has on what we're making. And I've never claimed to be in the health food business. So with apologies to
Fair enough.
dietitians and people concerned with that. By the way, there are plenty of great resources for stuff like that. Because I've seen them as I've been looking online for resources for what I do. Healthy recipes are extraordinarily popular for good reason. I'm just not a great source for them.
Miriam forgot the flour, but lined her pan with parchment paper. Will that probably work?
Yes. The parchment, if you don't flour it, it sometimes will stick, but that should work really, really well. I use a lot of times when we're baking, we use parchment, and it releases pretty well from almost anything.
And how do you come up with the combinations of fruits and nuts that you put in your chocolate bars? Ingrid would like to know.
Just playing. For every combination that ends up being something that we sell, there are probably 7 or 8 that people will never see for usually great reason. We basically call recipe development playing in the kitchen, because that's what we do. There have been days, especially in the summertime, when we've been slow because chocolate's not super popular when it's hot out, where we'll go to the grocery store, the co-op, and we'll just, 3 or 4 of us from the kitchen will start foraging for stuff that we want to play with. And we'll come back, and whether it's pastry or whether it's candy making, we'll just start having fun, and we'll create a whole bunch of different stuff. And sometimes it tastes really great. Now, we've all been doing this. I mean, most of the people who work in our kitchen have been with us for years, and they understand kind of my aesthetic and the flavor profiles I like, but they also have played with ingredients enough that they'll instinctively know what won't work. So we don't spend a lot of time creating really awful stuff, but we do spend a lot of time creating things that just aren't quite right. And the playing in the kitchen, the experimentation, is how we kind of get to our final recipes.
Lori wants to know if it's possible for you to show us your kitchen.
Kind of. So we actually have 2 kitchens. So I'll go to the end. And this is kind of looking down the kitchen in the chocolate, what we call the hotline, the cooking area. So I've been standing in front of our hotline. On the opposite side of it is one of our other ovens, and then all of our mixers and our sheeter and other pastry stuff. And then I talked about making caramel and the like. So when we make caramel, it goes onto these cooling tables. I think we have some that we made this afternoon. So this is, see if there's a good way to see it. This is our fleur de sel caramel. And you'll see the caramel color in the middle, and then you'll see a little bit of melted chocolate on top. And we do that so that when we cut the caramel and run it through our chocolate coating line, it runs through smoothly and it doesn't stick. You can see a palette of guittared chocolate back there. Actually, why not? I'll just walk through real fast. We have another kitchen downstairs that I'm not going to show you guys, just because it'll take too long. So this is, so actually to give you an idea with the guittared chocolate and the naming, this is a 41% milk and it's called Eclipse de Soleil. So, and really it is just a marketing name. This is, hold on one second. This is our panning room. It's basically where we make all of our chocolate covered nuts. And then this is our chocolate room. And this is where we do all of our handmade confections. And everything else, it's important, but not as sexy. We have an area where we pack everything up in our shipping department. And that's actually it.
Where's the chocolate?
Say it again?
Where's the chocolate river?
So unfortunately, that's in the kitchen downstairs that I can't show you guys. But one lucky person, sorry.
The golden ticket.
Yep.
Chuck, that's amazing. Thanks for showing us.
My pleasure. And we're back.
Chuck, someone would like to know if you've baked with the new pink chocolate.
Yes. Actually, no. Actually, I'm kind of answered without listening to the question. We use, it's called Ruby from Calabo, and we actually use that in candy making, but I have never baked with it. That's a great thought. Okay, I'll do something. And if there's a listserv that you guys have created at HealthRIGHT for this group, in a week or two, I'll let you know what happened. But that's actually a fantastic idea, and I haven't even thought to do that.
Where is your kitchen located? Is it in the city?
It is. It's in the Mission District. It's in a really cool old Art Deco building at the corner of 18th and York, which used to be the Challenge Dairy Company's butter factory back in the 1930s and 40s. As in butter factory, they used to bring cows here to milk them and make butter. So it's a very cool building.
You have lots of kudos here for how clean and impressive your kitchen is. And one question, what are your thoughts on using espresso powder?
So I use espresso powder a lot, mostly because it's really easy. So if you're baking a cake, like a chocolate cake, by the way, add a little bit of espresso or coffee to it. It really accentuates chocolate flavor well. What I do though is I use espresso powder rather than making hot espresso every time because it's really, really easy. I can't think of the brand we use, but it's an Italian company. It comes in a little jar that's red and green. And the reason I can't show it to you, this goes back to our kitchen, it's packaged in glass. So when we get it in from our distributor, we actually open up all of the glass jars, put it in plastic tubs, and throw the glass away before we bring it into the kitchen. It goes back to kind of our food safety program. So I don't have any to show you or to look at to tell you what the name is. But again, I can get it for you. And it's at, I first saw it at, if you live on the peninsula, Draeger's carries it, I know for sure. But it's really fantastic stuff. I highly recommend it. It keeps really, really well.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Any last bits of advice for folks on their brownies, Chuck?
The only bit of advice, and this is like a horrible, horrible thing to ask, is let them cool before you cut them. If you cut them when they're hot, they're just gonna crumble and they'll be really messy. Now that's fine. I mean, far be it for me to say you can't have a crumbly brownie. But again, given what I do for a living, I'm kind of like neurotically a perfectionist and everything has to kind of be perfect. And you won't get a nice perfect cut brownie until it cools pretty completely.
Actually, two more questions for you. You don't
Shoot.
sell baked goods on your website, right? Just chocolate?
Correct, because baked goods don't keep well. We sold baked goods when we were in our old location because we had a retail store where we had a pastry case with our chocolate case. But in our new location, we don't have retail yet. So we aren't making pastries at all right now. So at some point we will, but again, we only sell them retail. A cookie, a brownie, a lot of the things that we make and made for our store, even if we bake them and ship them same day, by the time you got them, they just wouldn't be as good.
Question about frosting or no frosting on the brownies?
I'm a no frosting person. If you frost them, I would use a very, very simple ganache. basically heavy cream and chocolate. And again, I'd use a semi-sweet to bittersweet, high quality chocolate to make the ganache. If you use like a classic like powdered sugar frosting, you're going to end up with something that quite frankly, I think is going to be too sweet for the brownie.
Perfect. And then do you cool the pan on a wired tray? And how long do you let them cool before you take them out of the pan?
Yeah, so definitely cool them on a wire rack if you can, because that air circulation is really important to cooling. So do that, and I would say well, in San Francisco right now, it would take about 5 minutes, but I'd say probably about 20, 30 minutes before you try cutting them.
Any other questions?
Has anyone taken them out of the oven yet? Are you close? Very nice, Jackie. They look great.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today and for supporting nutritious food for our community and for baking with us. If you'd still like to make a donation for our food pharmacy, you can do so on the event page or directly on our website, healthright360.org/donate. Chuck, thank you so much. I really cannot wait to try these brownies. Everyone, let us know how they turn out and please share your pictures with us. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
And to that end, sharing the pictures, if any of you have, after you've taken them out and have any questions, and I don't know if they can do this through you, and if you send in your pictures, but if you send in questions, I am happy to get back and answer any of them. I just realized I created another layer of complexity and work for everyone at HealthRIGHT, and I'm sorry.
Thank you. This was great fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, everyone.
Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck.
Bye.
Thank you. This was delightful.